Welcome back, America. It's Hugh playing a little Putin music this morning as he prepares to invade Ukraine. I'm joined by Congressman Mike Gallagher, and I'm ready to talk about that, Congressman, but a bit of levity at the first. I know you love Jeopardy. I want our audience to make sure that they see this episode of Jeopardy with your hero, Aaron Rodgers, as the guest host. Can we roll that, please?
Over to our two-day champion on the end. Scott, did you come up with the correct response? Who wanted to kick that field goal? That is a great question. Should be correct, but unfortunately for this game today, that's incorrect.
Did you notice how he froze, Mike? He just froze there. It was sort of like watching that game again.
I did watch that. I tweeted about that, and I called the contestant, I forget his name, a hero for bringing that up, because he is, of course, right, and Coach LaFleur is wrong, and I will go to my grave wondering what would have happened in that scenario if we made a different decision.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the obit that comes up that has, please send your donations to the field goal kicker whose life has been ruined by Matt LaFleur. All right, let's get to the serious thing. I've got a national interest story here, 150,000 troops. I thought it was 60 to 80,000. Russia now has on the Ukrainian border, and they have mobilized a bomber and fighter fleet there. All signs point to another invasion of Ukraine beyond what Russia has already done. What do you think of the situation?
Well, a couple of days ago in a hearing, I asked the commander of European Command what he rated as the likelihood of Russian invasion. And he said medium to low. But I have to tell you, I disagree with that assessment based on the open source imagery and reporting that I'm seeing, some of which you reference. This is the largest buildup since 2014, I believe. And if the Russians decide to invade, their current posture would only give us hours' notice at a max. So questions we need to be asking the administration: how frequently are we communicating with the Ukrainians? How proactive are they being in terms of trying to deter deter Russia's forthcoming invasion? Does Putin feel this is a Georgia scenario where we have no appetite to intervene? And that is my biggest concern. If you start to add all these things up, whether it's the way the CCP lectured us in Alaska about racial politics in America, added to the unconditional surrender in Afghanistan, added to the continued Chinese buildup and harassment of Taiwan, all of these things start to equate to a climate of weakness, which our adversaries interpret as a climate of opportunity, a period of opportunity for them to make some incredible gains. And so we have to reestablish some credible deterrence ASAP. And perhaps the biggest thing we can do in Ukraine specifically is to get the javelins in play. As part of the sale of javelins, Ukraine had to store them in their western regions. We should move them to the front. The Biden administration should be rushing to push through additional sales ASAP, because this could quickly get out of hand.
Now, I am assuming an invasion is going to happen, in which case I'm assuming that Russia will win, given the overwhelming preponderance of force, even with the javelins that were intended to deter, not to defeat. When that happens, Germany, I believe, should suspend and deconstruct Nord Stream 1 and 2, and that we ought to forward deploy troops to every NATO country with a border in Russia, and there are, I believe, 5 of them. I could be wrong. What do you make of those two immediate responses?
I agree completely. And I fear, our European allies just don't want another problem, right? Particularly Germany, he referenced, and France. And so I doubt we're going to get any help from our NATO allies on this. I would actually sanction the people close to Putin, which the recent round of sanctions did not do. It was pretty weak if you start to dig into it. You can move a military group of advisors out to the east of Ukraine. You can send a group of ships, not just one, into the Black Sea and keep them there, where their Spy-1 radars can monitor the border. You can kill a variety of targets if need be. Also, I think critically, Russia shouldn't get a summit until they pull their troops back. In other words, they shouldn't be able to use their troops as a chit at a summit that they get some concession in return. So there's a lot of things we can do. But if this spirals, this is not amateur hour right now. And because we have to deal with this situation, at the same time, we're deterring the Chi-Coms from invading Taiwan, which, of course, Admiral Davidson said is likely within the next 6 years. I think it's likely within the next 3 years if we continue on our current course.
Well, it seems to me that we have nothing we can do in Ukraine if Putin decides to go forward other than second-level sanctions, meaning forward deployments, disintermediation of assets. but we can deter Taiwan by sending the Seventh Fleet to the Straits. I mean, that can happen. They could do that. They can send an unmistakable message of opposition to an invasion of Taiwan today. So that is not a lost cause. Ukraine would be a lost cause. And the question is, why does Putin fear Biden less than he fears Trump if Trump was allegedly a Soviet agent, a Russian agent?
He doesn't. And this was probably the biggest media lie of the last 4 years. Notwithstanding some of the rhetoric that came out of the administration, if you actually examine the Trump administration's policy, it was quite tough on Russia. I mean, just ask the Marines who were in eastern Syria that schwacked a bunch of Russian mercenaries. I mean, there was actual tough policy on the ground that the media did not give the administration credit for. We called out Russia for their cyber infiltration of our infrastructure, a variety of things. We repeatedly sanctioned the Russians. And I think Trump himself probably was feared more by Putin than the Biden administration is right now. And I know that there's a lot in the media who would disagree with that statement. But the fact is, Putin is playing to his domestic base. I think they have Duma elections in the fall. So he's trying to stir up that sort of patriotic, nationalist Russian base right now. I'm not sure he's going to be successful, but this is a very, very dangerous situation. Now, if you ask our good friend Jerry Hendricks what we could do, he would say you could take a page out of the Cold War playbook. We used to practice emergency movements of U.S. troops to Europe during the Cold War. They were called reforgers, return of forces to Europe. You could do something similar along with large economic sanctions. You could surge the army into the Baltics and Poland. You could get the Air Force into Ramstein, the Navy into the Black Sea and the High North. You force Germany to pull out of NS2 at a minimum. You plan to stay in Europe for a year. You also simultaneously surge to Taiwan as well, because China may try something while we're distracted in Europe. I mean, this is the high stakes geopolitics we're playing right now. And I just fear we don't have the national will right now to stand up. And if America is seen to be weak, you can guarantee that every, rogue state, every Salafi jihadist group is going to be testing our limits, because it's not just Russia and China. It's also Iran. It's North Korea. We still have terrorist groups that want to destroy us in our way of life. The world is a very dangerous place right now, and it requires American strength in order to make it less dangerous. Again, this is not amateur hour. This is very dangerous.
Now, going back to your days as a Marine intel person, and you're on House Armed Services, I don't know what kind of information they give you. Do we know what Russia is going to do? I mean, do we have the capabilities to actually intercept their military orders, and we know what they're going to do before they do it?
It's possible. I'm not privy to that information, but it is certainly possible. I just don't know what level of placement and access we have and how high quality our sources are, whether they be human sources or signals intelligence sources. But ultimately, I think it comes down to, what is Putin prepared to do? What are his intentions? Is he just saber rattling for domestic purposes? Does he actually intend to seize the Donbass, and never let go of it for geopolitical purposes? It's quite valuable geopolitically.
Why is that? Would you explain to people what the Donbass is and why it matters to him? Everyone understood Crimea. That was the Black Sea. That's where their old port was. He wanted Crimea back. Why the Donbass?
Well, I mean, I think beyond sort of like it refers to the Donetsk and Luhansk region of Ukraine, if I'm saying that correctly. It's quite valuable, as I understand it, in terms of its water resources, in terms of sort of mineral resources and other things that it can actually provide to Crimea. And then, of course, there is just sort of the historical Russian connection to the region. And again, I just come back to this basic point that I think Putin is trying to not only mess with the NATO alliance structure, but also play to a domestic audience. And obviously, we've had high profile cases of opposition figures which have been poisoned allegedly by the Kremlin, a new term I am now coining called being Putined on your show right now. I think all of that suggests to Putin that he needs to shore up his domestic source of support, and this is a good way of doing it.
Under the NDAA, do we have arrangements to base troops in the Baltics? Do we have actual NATO troops there beyond a squad?
Well, this was certainly something that was discussed in the previous administration with Ambassador O'Brien. The question was, how do you get troops stationed in Germany and in Western Europe and push them out into the eastern flank and into the Baltics? And I think it's fair to say that we're not anywhere close to where we need to be. Obviously, Poland in recent years has offered to host an enhanced U.S. troop presence. They offered to name the base like Trump base or something. I think we should take advantage of that. I think you want your troops forward deployed. You want them constantly rotating. You don't want them in garrison in Germany. You actually want them patrolling the eastern flank of NATO, particularly in the Baltic states. And oh, by the way, that's a much more fun and productive deployment if you're on active duty. That's where you want to be. You actually want to be out there mixing it up as opposed to just doing PowerPoint slides in garrison. So we are nowhere close to where we need to be in terms of changing our force posture in NATO. The problem, I think, with NATO is we tend to focus solely on inputs, right? Every country needs to meet their 2% of GDP goal. That's all well and good, but we really need to focus on outputs. What is that 2% actually getting us? Are we coordinating with our allies in order to create a credible deterrent posture that sends a signal to the Russians, you can't get away with this?
Well, I'm going to coin another term. The Biden administration is demonstrating the Packers effect. They are retreating. And by retreating, yeah, well, it's true. It's absolutely true. They're running off the field, and right now they ought to be doing a Browns-like drive into the 7th Fleet, into the Taiwan Straits, as opposed to a Packers retreat. But you're right. Being Putin goes along with the Packers retreat. So 2 new terms on the Hugh Hewitt Show this morning, Congressman Gallagher. Let's play that again, just so everyone can see Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, just one more time.
Should be correct, but unfortunately for this.
All right, we're having trouble playing.
Who wanted to kick that field goal? That is a great question. Should be correct, but
my favorite
for
Jeopardy moment ever. I think Congressman Gallagher. The draft is coming up. Maybe they'll get a new field goal kicker. What do you think?
A microaggression, Hugh. That was a microaggression.
Microaggression. I know you're very, very touchy. All right, Congressman, be well. Follow him at Rep Gallagher on Twitter. Follow me to the next segment, America.